feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks, coming at you Monday morning. It's March 10th after the Wolves 141-124 win over the San Antonio Spurs on Sunday night. The Wolves' fifth straight win. The competition has not been great. That's wins over the Suns, Sixers, Hornets, Heat, and Spurs. But the Wolves have definitely been rolling since Dante DiVincenzo and especially Julius Randle returned from injury. I'm joined by Jace, Frederick from the Pioneer Press to get into last night's game against the Spurs and just kind of continue tracking along where this thing is moving. Obviously, Rudy Gobert returns last night, so we'll that's the most recent step in the progression of this team right now. We'll dive into it. Hi, Jace. What's up?
The list of opponents sounds worse when you read through it. I'm always just kind of like, yeah, it hasn't been great. And then you read through it, I'm like, oh, that's pretty bad.
I know. and it's even like the Suns and Heat are like sometimes like you put them in the okay bin, but
they don't really belong
also
there. Either.
Yeah. I remember I was texting you because I was watching that Heat Knicks game, and I was texting you about Bam guarding Cat or whatever, but the Heat had Khalil Ware. I don't know how much you've seen of him. I mean, I've watched a lot of Miami, but whenever I'm watching them, I'm like, oh shit, like this is gonna be like a tough game. They're starting Bam and Ware, and then you get that version of the Heat on Friday, and then this Spurs team is getting kind of killed by everybody. The Hornets and Sixers have not been good. The Suns are a disaster, but I will say, like, even through that lens, I feel pretty good about what the Wolves have. Like, as good as I could through that lens about what they're doing, because the Dante reintegration has been seamless. The Julius one has been seamless. I mean, Rudy, we'll talk about it. He got in foul trouble early, but wasn't problematic, right? I don't know. I still, the schedule is the schedule. We talked about this. We're like, let's make sure we don't overreact and crown them when it gets really easy here. But we also have to do the alternative too and be like, well, this has been pretty good given who it is that they're playing. I don't know.
I think when we talked about this, probably maybe the last time I was on, like 2 weeks ago, when we talked about, hey, the schedule, and then everybody's going to come back and we're going to be like, oh, wow, look, maybe they found something. But at the same time, back then, I said it was going to be all about process. And I've really liked the process. I've really liked the way they've played basketball. It hasn't been these eking out, it's a slog. And at the end of the game, they make enough, they make a couple tough shots and win by 6 or whatever. It's been really good offense. That was kind of the Heat game, but it's been really good offensive process at basketball and generating a lot of really good looks and knocking them down and playing pretty solid defensively last night, kind of withstanding. But the energy in general has been good and it's been convincing. And yeah, so I mean, you can only do what you can do, like, against these teams, but they're doing exactly what they're supposed to do. And I think they're doing it in a way that's pretty repeatable, where it's like, okay, this is how you guys play offense now, and this looks better. And certainly there are different levels to it where other teams are going to switch things up defensively, provide more resistance, and then the test is, can you keep doing what you're doing? But they're establishing some stuff right now that maybe they can lean on when things get hard. And that's exactly what you would want to see. So, yeah, it's not just 5 wins. It's 5 wins where it's like, this has actually been pretty good basketball. And playing to guys' strengths, and in seemingly guys' strengths making things easier for others. And all the things that you were kind of hoping to see, especially at this point in the season.
And it hasn't just been like Ant. There's other kind of the slog parts of the schedule earlier in the season where it's a couple, bad opponents, and Ant has like 45 or his 50-point game. It's kind of been with a muted Ant. I know he was sick in Miami, and then I don't know exactly where he was at last night. Put up good numbers, but you wouldn't be like Ant drove these wins, and it was him. I mean, it was really, a lot of the wins have been what Dante's been able to bring from just a burst of shooting and spacing and getting them out in transition, playing defense activity, right? And then what I want to start talking about first here is how Julius, I think, kind of drove the win last night with just the playing through him. It was, I know we were kind of going through some of his assists last night afterwards, and as assists work in the NBA, like sometimes it's like, oh, you got an assist for that one, cool, but
that overall, is league wide,
Yeah. It's what Julius is Julius is playmaking. And he's playmaking in the way that this team needs him to play make. They were going to him consistently, like in the post, in the middle of the floor, especially when Rudy was off the floor last night, drawing two, kicking out wide open threes. I mean, he is doing that, and that is another gear when Ant doesn't have it, or just 82 games, like another way to play in the midst of a season, in the midst of a game, whatever it might be. I've been really impressed with Randle these last 3 games. His stat lines for the last 3 games are 25, 10, and 9, 13, 10, and 9, 14, 7, and 10. This is the version of Julius Randle that this team needs. I think that's pretty clear. What stood out about it to you?
I think just from the big picture, I remember, and Finch, I think, said this pre-Randle injury when he was starting to play well there, of like the first month of the season coming out of camp, they told him, hey, we're going to need you to score. Yeah. Because just looking at the personnel, like we're going to need that out of you. And you could tell he was then looking to score and thinking, okay, they need me to score 25 a game. And I think then that gets in your mind a little bit. Maybe when you get in traffic, you're like, I got to score through this stuff, or my mentality when I'm driving is to go score, probably taking some tough shots, probably over dribbling to get to certain spots. And now he just looks like he's less thinking, more playing naturally, and you can just see like, oh, this is actually a pretty smart offensive basketball player. And there are like a bunch of numbers that back it up that I just looked up this morning. It's what's funny. The beginning of the year, okay, so they started the Julius 9-10 game winning streak, whatever it's at now, on January 22nd. Pre-January 22nd, Julius was averaging 8 potential assists per game.
Okay.
Right? That's how many you could have. Guys made all the shots, whatever. Post that, it's 7.9. and obviously the number's been up a little bit these last 3. I think it's up to like 11, and that certainly bumps the numbers. But in general, you would say in these times with these games, Julius has been beneficial for them. And so much of that then comes down to, oh, well, they're just making shots now. And I don't disagree with that, but I really do think a big part of it comes from the ways in which the shots are generated. And even just like from the Julius driving kicks, Julius post up, double quick kick out. Like there are more numbers that show like why the Wolves are making more shots. And they are. You want to look, okay, that pre-January 22nd, and these numbers will sound good, but they're not in comparison. On open threes, the Wolves were, as a team, 38.3% from deep on open threes. Wide open, 39.1. But in the first 5 games of the winning streak, when Julius was out there, 41.1% on open threes, 44.4% on wide open threes. These last 5 games, they're hitting 48.9% of their wide open threes. So like these big numbers, and you can just go, okay, so they're knocking down shots, and that's the difference, and that's why the offense is there. But it's just the whole thing of when you heard guys talk, and I've tried to bring it up in the past because Finch talked about it, players have talked about it. It's the rhythm. It's like, Are we just standing there? Are you catching grenades? Are you kind of like I'm standing in the corner and I'm the in case of emergency? I've been watching this possession for 20 seconds as I stand still, and now I shoot the ball. Yeah, like okay, here we go. Oh, here it is. Oh, okay, I'll shoot it. Yeah. Or is it okay? The ball is moving. I have a pretty good idea of when it's coming. I know where I need to get it. I can kind of read Julius of as soon as my defender comes, I know he's going to kick it. And so I'm ready. Like as soon as I see my defender move, I'm ready to catch the ball. And I think we're seeing a lot more of that. Not to get too stat heavy here, but one more, I might as well just run through them all. In that first Julius pre-January 22nd was averaging 3.34 seconds every time he touched the ball. 2.34 dribbles every time he touched the ball. Since then, so it was 3.34 seconds before, post January 22nd with all the wins, 2.8 seconds every time he touches the ball, 1.9 dribbles. And I really do think it's the dribbles is one thing. It's not over dribbling. You see it like the second the double comes, whether that's in the post, whether that's on the drive, it's kicking out. It's not getting into traffic. Now we're in traffic. Now I'm doing 3 pump fakes. Now I'm getting rid of it. It's just, I think it's quicker reads. And that just the time on it too is the sense of when he gets the ball, he's going. You don't see him sitting there jab stepping guys at the top of the arc, and be like, okay, what am I going to do here? Am I going to shoot this 3? Am I going to slowly back myself down? He's making a lot more quick decisions. I just feel like he's just playing basketball now. Not like an agenda in my mind of I got to score, I got to pass, whatever. And I just think everybody's playing better off of it. And guys are moving better on the perimeter, which is making his life easier, but just better basketball all around. And I think Julius and just the way he's approaching offense right now is a big part of it. Because we've always said this. You can maybe survive one ball stopper, and I think Ant's just going to be a ball stopper. You can't survive two. And that's what made some of Cat and Ant stuff really tough. And it's what made Ant and Julius stuff really tough. Julius is not playing basketball like a ball stopper right now. Even when he's got it in his hands, he's not playing like a ball stopper, and it's sparking a lot of winning.
And even if he holds it for a second, you're like, oh, you kind of held that for a beat too long. What he's doing after that beat is quick. You know, that's a lot of the, like, he's kind of surveilling for the pass. And it holds up at the top of the key for a second, but then he's like, boom, okay, now I'm going left dribble, I'm going all the way to the basket. Like, it's never going to be five guys playing exactly like Nas. We could say that, like, every you know, that's not, certain players cannot permanently do the 0.5 mentality. And if they do need to be a scorer and they do need to be an isolation guy for you sometimes, as Julius does, as obviously Ant does, then yeah, it's about not holding it for too long, you know? And I think I've really seen a shift from Julius in these 5 games since he's been back. And I know you said the potential assists element of it has not necessarily gone up. And maybe it is just the last couple of games it has. I just watched last night, and maybe because they were coming down and he's posting up and they're bringing the doubles there right away in the first quarter, and he's finding Mike Conley for kickouts or whoever for kickouts, and he got that right away. It looked to me from there then he wanted to pass. Like, that was almost his preference, where he's like, okay, my goal here is not to get to the basket and get to my turnaround. My goal here is to get to this spot on the floor, to get the second guy and to kick it there. And that's a pretty rare thing. And I don't mean to compare Julius Randle to Nikola Jokic, but I think that it crosses my mind of when I watch Jokic get it in the post or in a situation where you're in this in-between situation of, is this double coming? Is the extra defense coming? What Jokic does is he tries to, like, turn himself into a way where he wants that second defender to come in here, because we know about Jokic. What is his preference? His preference is, man, I don't want to take this, like, turnaround sort of thing right here that, yeah, I can make it. I just want this other guy to come over. I'm going to drop it to Aaron Gordon. That's a dunk, you know, and that's smart. As good as Jokic is at making that shot, an Aaron Gordon dunk underneath the basket, if he catches it, is 100%, you know? And I just see a shift, not to Jokic levels, of course, but of Randle doing a little bit more of that, where his goal, it doesn't seem that scoring is even like the first or second option there. It's like, okay, now I'm going to go get it. Or on an offensive rebound, I'm going to score. He's not trying to self-create his own offense. He's trying to, like, self-create offense for the group, or at least that's what it's looked like last night and against these crappy opponents recently.
That's what it has to be, right? I mean, because if you have multiple guys on the floor in the same lineups who are trying to create offense for themselves, that's when it just gets sticky. And that's when everybody else kind of falls out of the picture. And we have not seen that. I mean, the last 2 games ago in Miami, the leading scorer scored 15 points. Last night, I think 8 guys scored in double figures. It's at the diet of, like, how many shots everybody's getting. It's pretty standard up and down the board of, 8 shots, 10 shots, 11 shots, 12 shots, whatever. I think he's just been a huge part of that. It really has been a very nice compliment to what in the past, you know, was just kind of an Ant show sometimes. And now it's not that, because the ball is often in Julius's hands. So if he's kind of sparking movement and creation for others, and relatively quick creation for others, then that's just going to lead to more, I don't know, good rhythm, good flow offense. And I think what you said, like, the quick thing he did in the Spurs game last night of, okay, I drive, I kick, was him going, okay, I think they're going to help on these drives, and I think they're going to double me here, and just having a firm understanding of, here's what San Antonio is going to do, so here's what I'm going to do.
Right.
And it's almost like maybe if they had adjusted, he would have adjusted, but there was no need to. And it's just, here's what the right play is going to be tonight. And he was confident in that and made a lot of good plays out of it. And the challenge will certainly be when you get to a point where, okay, team X has multiple good defenders. They can defend Julius one-on-one. What happens there? Does he get his points? Do they still run good offense out of it? Does it get sticky because Julius is like, the help's not coming now, so what are we going to do? But the looks they're seeing right now, he's making all the right plays out of it. And sure, there might be a possession here or there where you're like, bad pass there or whatever, trying to get too cute or whatever, but just very good.
Dante DiVincenzo, when we asked him about Randle after the game, said something similar. Play that clip.
So many of Julius's assists were for threes. How do you think that is like progressed? Just him drawing a crowd, finding guys for kicks over the course of the season.
It's a feel. It's it takes a while throughout the season for guys to get used to playing with him, and when they do, look how good you look. And I think he's doing an amazing job of making the right play almost every time, and he's understanding that when they come, pass it, and if they don't, no one can stop him. And we're going to need that going forward down the stretch because, as the game slows down, in the playoffs and stuff like that, like I said, you have your go-to guys where we can play many different ways. So we rely on his decision-making a lot.
So what do you make of the feel and like how it takes a while to have a feel playing with Randle and if we're going to say the Wolves do have now a feel for playing with Randle, why did it take 64 games? You know what I'm saying? Like how do you you're here? Why did it take so long to get there? Do you think it's just his style?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, he is a little bit unique in that there aren't that many fours who generally play at the top of the floor and then work their way down and mid-range kick out spray. Like, even if you want to say Cat scored from the top of the floor is very different.
Sure.
His was like hard line, straight line drives or shooting the three, and Julius was it's just more methodical. And so you're like, wait, am I getting the ball here? Is he trying to get to a spot right now to score? Or is he waiting to draw the help? I don't know. So I think that's part of it. I also think it's fair to say that in mid-January, they were starting to figure it out. So it wouldn't have been 60. It was probably going to be closer to 40 the halfway through the season or whatever.
I agree with that.
I think it's a combination of those things. Like, he is a little bit of a funky, clunky offensive player, but now I think, and the Wolves just aren't. I think part of it comes down to they have some guys where you're like, okay, not to the point in their careers early on where they're like savants of basketball and they read, okay, so this guy does this and that means I do this. They're not the best. A lot of these guys haven't been the best at like adjusting to the players around them. That's why with Rudy it took so long, and it's a lot of these same guys, and so I think if you swapped it out again, I think it took them a while to adjust to Dante, who is not really a player that you'd think you'd have to adjust to.
It is weird that it took Mike a while to adjust. I think because Mike was struggling with it, that made me like believe in it less. Does that make sense? Because if it was just like, oh, Ant isn't getting it or Jade, the younger players, like you said,
right.
I think Mike not working made me lose a little bit of faith, but I think maybe what you're going to say, that might have just been exterior reasons that weren't as Randle related as maybe we were, I don't know, saying at the time.
I just don't think Mike was very healthy to start the year.
Yeah.
And I think, at that point, guys usually don't say that as they're going through it. I don't think he was in like the best physical spot and played poorly out of it. And then you just see a bunch of guys where it's like, well, they're playing worse, and they're playing worse. What's the difference here? And you point to one guy, it's like, you.
Sure.
And I think that can absolutely be a part of it.
I mean, I'm not even laughing at it. I did that. I was,
we all did it. I mean, it's what else? And I will say this for Randle, we'd point at like the turnovers, and I remember like clips and whatnot where it's like, look at this possession from Randle, and it would be 12 seconds of him dribbling to a spot, taking a bad shot or whatever. But I do remember those clips being like, no one's moving. Like, no one is doing anything. Like, they're just standing there watching, and there's not a passing lane because they aren't moving at all. And so their defender's like, okay, I've got my hand in the passing lane and I'm watching Randle dribble. Where now, if you watch Randle in the post on his drives, whatever, guys are constantly cycling. I mean, they're constantly cycling around the perimeter, and they're looking for the window of like, okay, the corner pass isn't here. If I take 5 steps out, now I'm open. We've always seen Dante do that. I'm seeing Jaden do it more. I'm seeing Nas do it more. I'm seeing Nas be like, okay, I'm at, the break point of the arc here. I'm going to cycle up, 5 feet to my right, get closer to the top of the arc, and now there's a better window. Yeah, and we always think off-ball movement is like cuts, and that certainly is a part of it, but so much of it is just relocating. It's just
Reposition, yep.
cycling, you know, like swapping spots with guys, so that things get more difficult for your defender to have you and the ball covered. They're just doing a lot more of that. And so now Randall's like, okay, I get to my spot and, oh, he moved to where there's a clear passing window. This game is a lot easier than when I would do it and be like, oh, he didn't move. He's still in the corner. Literally his guy is between me and him. So what am I going to do with it? You know?
I've got a break here. Today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. And I think Wednesday night, Wolves Nuggets. It's a 9 p.m. local start. Perfect time to get out to Falling Knife, watch with other Wolves fans in there, relive spring 2024 from the Western Conference semis. Every game is on at Falling Knife, and it is for a late start is a good reminder that every game they are staying open late. Whenever the game starts, they will be there and open until it closes. So I just thought, put that on your radar for Wednesday night. Go in there, have some great beers, rectangle food truck, and everything that Falling Knife provides. They also have March Madness trivia at 5 p.m. on Sunday, Selection Sunday, and then the Wolves games at 6. So if you're looking for something to do on Sunday, I think that is another option as well. Falling Knife Brewing Company is in Northeast Minneapolis. Today's show is also brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company. And if you have a home improvement need, look into Your Home Improvement Company. You can go to yourhomeimprovementco.com and see if what they have to offer meets your needs. They have a full variety of things that they can get done for you, and all their projects are done by certified local professionals and backed with a lifetime warranty. Also financing options where it's zero money down, zero interest, and zero payments until 2026. The two deals that they still have going on right now are buy 2 windows, get 2 windows free if you're looking to get those taken care of in the spring. Also bathroom renovations, 30% off a simple tub to shower conversion or a full-on bathroom renovation. They are doing 30% off on those as well. Again, that's Your Home Improvement Company. You can go to yourhomeimprovementco.com, or you can call them at 866-777-YHIC. It's Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better.
Okay, I got just these 2 more stats that I looked up, just team-wide, because I brought up the Randle ones, and I just want to note, just liking the process of their last 5 games, regardless of opponent. So pre-January 22nd, before they started winning, when they were like, hey, we're healthy, but we stink. Offensively, they were averaging 3.1 seconds per touch, like just across the board, and 283 passes a game. These last 5 games, 2.9 seconds per touch, which is 6th lowest in the NBA, and 303 passes per game. When anything over 300 is a pretty big number. So the ball is moving. The ball is moving, and that is kind of becoming, it's looking, at least right now, at least against these opponents, who don't provide a ton of resistance. I get that. It's kind of becoming more of their offensive identity, which is a lot closer to what the head coach wants the offense to look like. It's quick decision-making. Yeah, you can drive the ball. Nobody's saying, don't, take your 3 dribbles or whatever, but get somewhere with it. Do it quickly. Make the right play out of it. Use your gravity to the team's advantage. They're just doing a lot more of that. And that's exactly where you would want to see them be in the middle of March here.
When I asked Rudy last night, kind of about it's the same starting lineup again, what that wasn't working at the beginning of the season. Why is it working better now? Why did Finch believe in it and cycle back to that? And when he's kind of said at the end, he was like, we just needed to start moving the ball. This was always the thing, and now we're actually seeing moving the ball and ball movement, and that's why all those numbers are going up for the passes, and you're seeing the efficiency also go up. And we're also seeing that starting lineup last night, which I want to kind of talk about next, where, and I was sitting there too. I saw the PR tweet come through, and it's like, okay, Gobert's back and Conley's starting again. It's the same group. You go, huh? But again, against the Spurs, and I'm not saying that's permanently the right starting lineup or anything. I just last night reminded you that if you play the right way with that starting group, that you can have completely fine offense. And great. I mean, last night the offense was great. I give the Spurs a lot of credit for that. But you can play good offense with this group, it's seeming. I mean, I still have some questions about it. I don't wanna fully all the way there, but remember before, man, it looked like it'd be the first quarter. It'd be like, all right, Conley, Edwards, McDaniels, Randle, Gobert, and it just like is the nails on the chalkboard of all the stuff. I'm like, none of these guys could shoot. There's no spacing. There's none of that, and it's.
We're through 5 minutes here at Target Center, and it's 6-4. I mean, it was pretty frequent.
And they're losing 6-4.
Yeah.
Wizards lead.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just served as an example, and hopefully this is starting to sink in. And maybe this is an advantage of playing these crappy teams. It's like establish some ball movement habits with your main group against these crappy teams. Like San Antonio sucked at doubling Julius Randle last night. Like, you don't need to bring the double and then like the other two guys both to the nail as well for like a 4-person kind of double and leave Dante DiVincenzo. Like, I'm not saying Julius Randle was making, or any of them are making like super elaborate reads consistently. They're just making the right read and moving it. And if they do that, yeah, you saw what last night was. Scored 141 points.
It's just, it really does, like, if you pass the ball more and the ball moves more and everybody touches it, more shots are going to go in. They just are. The idea, it rears its head again and again that somebody dribbling the ball for 20 seconds and kicking to the corner at the end of it, that shot's just not going to go down as often as the ball cycling through pass out of it, because you have time to do that because the first person only ate 10 seconds of the shot clock, and now there's time for multiple actions, time to get to the ball the second side, play off the catch, all that stuff. But yeah, I agree with you. The starting lineup thing is kind of interesting because you can tell, and I don't disagree with it, that they really just want to marry Conley and Gobert. So
let's talk about that. Yeah.
If Rudy's going to start, Mike's going to start, because how else are you going to marry those two together? And I think they believe that's right. And I'm not sure they're wrong. I mean, it makes sense. It's just then when you look at the lineups, it's like, okay, but then is there enough shooting on just a game to game? Because it's not always going to go that well. It's not always going to be that easy. So that's where a lot of people will say
think the answer is no. There's not going to be enough shooting in that group.
So
but we're going to try to survive it kind of to keep Conley and Gobert married up. You hope to in those. I mean, they're playing like it was like the first 5 minutes of the first quarter and the first 5 minutes of the third quarter with that group.
And then
Nas and Dante come in for Mike and Rudy,
Right.
and it switches it and it gets you into that cycle. I just know if I was watching like the Clippers and they were doing that, I'd be like, okay, what are we doing here? This doesn't make sense. Why are you just starting this to get to your next thing? But I do think like drilled into it more as we are, following this team all the time. Like I get what they're trying to make sense of here in a situation that doesn't perfectly make sense. But maybe that's just how this group has to work, right? I don't know. It's what the coach believes has to work, and I don't know. I guess we just see if this new ball movement, everything, everyone's more chemistry, all those sort of things. If it's cleaner than it was before, and it's not 6-4, 8 minutes into the first quarter against the Wizards, like I don't know. I don't know what to say other than because I know everyone wants me to be like, it's fucking ridiculous. Why are you doing that? Like, yeah, it's not what I would do either. I would not start McDaniels, Randle, and Gobert, but they're going to, and I'm going to leave my mind open to the possibility that it's not as bad as I think it might be. You know what I'm saying? I think it might ultimately cost him in a series or a game or whatever. But I don't know. They're showing something with it. So I'm going to stay open-minded to seeing what it is.
And it seems like everybody's pretty bought into what they should be doing right now, just as a team. And if this combination leads to that general buy-in across the board and everybody's playing generally well, then that makes sense to me. And if you get down 2-1 in a playoff series and it's because you're chasing every game, maybe in game 4, they'd be like, let's put Nas in. Let's get some more shooting into that starting lineup or whatever. Whoever's not playing well, whatever the reason, let's adjust from there. But I do understand that too of like, okay, well, if you're going to start Gobert, you're probably going to start Gobert. Okay, we want to keep Conley and Gobert together. Okay, then the only other real option is putting Nas in over Julius. Okay, Julius playing pretty well, and he's playing buying into this team aspect and he's driving, winning right now. Nas is still playing well off the bench. Nas is still getting a lot of shots. It's so everybody's still kind of getting what they want to get. It just maybe not at the exact point in the game you want it to come from. But maybe this is the best way because I know they've sat there and I'm sure mapped out rotations of like, here's what we want to get to. How are we going to get to it? Man, it sure seems like this is the easiest way to do that. Man, we like Dante and Nas together, but we don't think that when Jalen Clark's coming in the game is now the best time to now we're going to roll out our Rudy Mike stuff,
Exactly, yeah.
So I can understand all of that. And yeah, let's just see where it goes because we can blame the lineup. They played really bad basketball for large parts of the beginning of the year. And I don't think just making a lineup change was going to correct any of that. But now they're playing better basketball, and we'll see, like, are there certain matchups where it's like, okay, you're playing better basketball, but you're still not working against this team. Your starting lineup still doesn't work against that team. So now is that the time to make the change or like
that's
knowing when it's coming?
Can we get, if we're giving them the grace of like, okay, I don't like you're starting Gobert and Conley for these reasons. And in this matchup, like last night, they're starting Bismack Biyombo and they have a,
shout out Bismack. You always think he's out of the NBA, and then he's back in a starting lineup.
Yeah, right. Like it was a matchup that worked in that sort of way. But shouldn't it then be if there is a matchup against a team coming up, and I would need to think of which one of these it is, where you go, wow, this puts Mike in a weird spot early on. And here's Rudy is needing to guard a center who spaces the floor. Then can we not go to starting Nas and Dante just for that game?
Yeah, sure.
And if you don't, then you are saying that the reason you're not doing it is at least largely politics. A combination of politics and continuity would be the reasons for not doing it. And I'm with it. I'm fine with starting it, but they're just go with the best lineup for that night. Establish those habits for when it's the playoffs, when you don't know who it's going to be, because if you go and whoever you draw in the first round, and it is one of those where it's not as clean for Rudy and Mike, it's a tough matchup for Mike defensively. And it's just one of those where Rudy isn't as empowered to do his stuff. Well, then do you have that other gear? Are you just going to then start it in the playoffs? My biggest thing, and particularly, well, at least for me, I feel like I'm very much still in the learning phase of trying to understand what this team is now. Then let's learn as much as we can and be strategic about trying different things. And I think we're seeing that behavior from Finch in the back end of the rotation, a real sort of flexibility, opponent dependent. I would just like to keep the same energy in the starting lineup if and when that makes sense. And I don't think it would be that often, but I think there are some obvious opponents where, and maybe have a playoff one would be like Houston, where I'm not sure Mike and Rudy would be.
I think Rudy's a really good matchup for Sengun. Frankly, I think we saw him, and then when Rudy was out in that Houston game, like, he was a big issue where Rudy kind of mutes him to a fair degree. But
first game, Sengun got him. I know everyone kind of says that, and I've talked to some people about that. I'm still a little scared about Rudy guarding a Jokic, a Sabonis, or a Sengun straight up in the post, and they play through that for the whole game. But I take your point.
Yeah, I don't put Sengun in that same category as the other two. But I think the only counter would be how many good teams change their starting lineups matchup dependent.
I mean, so it's hard when I'm watching the rest of the league and I maybe watch the previous game, but teams do,
and it's health related. A lot of times it's like health related of like, this guy's actually out tonight, so that's why this guy's starting. I don't know how many like championship level teams are, and you could say, the Wolves aren't championship level, but
what about the Celtics? Sometimes they will start the make a decision of how they're going to play the bigs based on opponent. If they're
you're saying whether Horford's starting or not?
Yeah. I mean, it's not, and maybe I'm going to, and I'm not a coach. I don't know. Like maybe this is. I take your point.
Wait,
maybe
so when they're fully healthy, who does Derek White come off the bench or does Drew Holiday?
Yeah, Derek White. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and they've been hurt and stuff like that. So kind of like.
That's my, I'm not even saying, I'm not disagreeing with you. It's my only counterpoint would be like, how many like championship caliber teams do that?
Yeah, I can think about that more. I don't. It's not a lot. You're right. It's not a lot. but I think it's teams who have players who are circumstantially different. And if the Wolves aren't a team with players who are circumstantially different, then I don't know. Like it just it makes sense to me.
Yeah, and then there was the Phoenix game, like DiVincenzo's minutes restriction. Sure, like it's easier to manage off the bench when he had that. That makes sense to me. But that was a prime game where I was thinking, okay, Phoenix isn't, and I don't know if you necessarily don't know the other team's starting lineup when you make yours, whatever. But Phoenix isn't starting Tyus Jones. I'm not starting Mike Conley.
Yeah, right.
Because that's setting him up like, okay, you have to guard somebody else who is significantly bigger than you. It just doesn't make sense here. So that for me would be the times, and Houston's a good one where he just doesn't really have a matchup. Somebody to guard. It's difficult. They're big and long and can kind of hound him. Over the course of a series, I think he can kind of figure out how to operate within that. But on a night-to-night basis, it's like this is not going to be a night where Mike shines. And I think it is easy to pick those lineups out. Rudy, I think it's a little more difficult to do that with at all times. So that is where it gets a little bit trickier of like, okay, we're always going to keep Mike and Rudy together. And we have to explain to Rudy why we don't think he'd be that as impactful here. Where Rudy would go, well, I would be.
And I think maybe the compromise is not closing that game. And we've seen Finch make that compromise throughout the season with.
I'm not saying I think what you're saying, not starting situationally, I think that makes sense. Of like hey, we can pick out these 5 teams where we will roll up this starting lineup. I think that makes a lot of sense. I wouldn't be opposed to doing that. I think it can be a little tricky sometimes as a coach, but I do think that Minnesota has gotten to a point where it probably could still execute that. And that could be on the table. I just don't know if they'll do it. If you said, do you think they're going to do it? I would say no.
I get that. I think it's worth thinking about or for our purposes talking about.
I agree with you that do you really just want to get to the playoffs and be like, well, let's just go with this one because we're down in this series when you haven't done it at all? There is something to we've played 82 games and I know the Wolves are chasing a top 6 or whatever, but you can experiment a little bit of like, well, we're not going to win or lose this game because we roll with this starting lineup, but we think it might be better for this matchup and we might need it later.
I would just be curious to see it, specifically Rudy and Mike coming off the bench. Yeah. What is that like? What does that feel like? And I think if it were me and I were a coach, I think I would want to like get a feel of that for a couple games to have that in my bag of maybe this is what we have to do in a playoff series. I do think the counterpoint though is like Naz and Dante are extremely comfortable coming off the bench and have shown that does not disrupt their rhythm whatsoever. You're able to still get the same production. The only thing is it's going to be, if you want those guys to be playing high 30s minutes, it's complicated. It's harder, to be able to get there or, Dante's really rolling. They're like, we want to play him 36 tonight. Well, you might then skip a full quarter of needing to play Mike. Like Mike Conley doesn't play that whole quarter. And is that weird? There's ripple effects with that too. I just think this is all, my only point is like, this should all things should be fair on the whiteboard right now. And and I know you gotta be winning too. Don't take chances that are like completely developmental. But if you can make a reasonable case in a matchup that this might help, then there's this outside value of it's giving you something else that you haven't seen before. But again, for last night, worked great against the Spurs. I think a lot of these not very good opponents that they're playing the rest of the way, you'll be fine with just starting and rolling with continuity. But I don't want them to get into this is just what we do. That part I think could be dangerous.
I think your point of if you get to a point where you're like, hey, we want Naz or Dante to play 36, that is where it gets tough because hey, just do the math in your head. If they aren't starting the first or the third, they come in at the 6-minute mark. There's your 12 minutes. They got to play the rest of the way. It's the final 18 of each half if you're getting at 36 without them starting. And that's a lot to put on anybody. And like you said, that means you're destined to leave other guys on the bench for rest of games, or does that make sense either? Does it make sense for Mike Conley to play 6 minutes of a quarter and then sit the rest of the half and then go start the next 6 after sitting?
It's just going to be harder to get a good Mike Conley in that next.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. He's like, oh, I haven't played an hour. You know, like,
Literally,
okay,
yeah.
let's get out there. You know,
Yeah. And this is why, and Kyle's been kind of saying this for like a month. He's like, I just think Chris Finch is the most important person in the organization for the next month, because these are difficult questions. They're difficult puzzles to solve. We have no idea what we're talking about with this stuff, from like a understanding how that would impact Rudy or how hard this stuff is. Like, yeah, we've all could do that on 2K, but like there is, I do recognize that Finch knows this team obviously way better than I or you do. I just don't want him to be dogmatic. And when I reflect on the first 40 games of the season, and if I were to critique it, I think it was too dogmatic. All of it, just and through injury and some necessity, we've seen Finch loosen a bit. And I just think there's benefits that can come from that, and we've begun to see it.
I think what's interesting about the injury, though, is you go, okay, well, now they're playing Clark more and Terrence Shannon. It's a little bit, little bit. Like Clark played like 14 minutes, Terrence played like 7, and I really don't know if it would have been the full 7 if Rudy didn't have the 3 fouls.
It would. I'm not sure Shannon. Well, I guess Finch did say post game. He's like,
I know. So I don't want to.
I put that in my notes too. I was like,
came in at like 7 minutes left in the second quarter. Were you really going to get to that no matter what? You know,
yeah.
But
no, he was not. The answer to that is no. He was not going to get to that no matter what. We've seen him have the intention of doing something and then being like, it didn't work in the flow of the rotation tonight.
They're going to play 9. I think on a night-to-night basis, you can probably mark down 9 if they're healthy. But the whole point for me is, okay, through injuries, they've started to play more guys or whatever. It doesn't really feel that way. It feels like these other guys are playing better. Like Jaden is playing better. Nas is playing really well now. Julius has just figured out how he fits best into this team. And a lot of that was happening before the injury. So I really do think they just kind of figured it out. And maybe the time was required of what didn't work. Or maybe the injuries were required just to have Jaden be like, oh, this is how I can play offense and
right.
Good. But that and now he's doing it within what they have, so I don't. Well, I mean, yeah, the dog, but maybe to some degree it was like, yeah, it was right. They have had so much time together and eventually they got there, and it took half a season, and that is more normal than anybody wants to give it credit for. Yeah, I don't know.
No, you're right. I think you're right. Maybe that is more normal than I wanted to give it credit for. It probably is. I still don't think it worked very well, and so again, just to my point, should all be up for consideration. I think that's the biggest thing. Grab another break here. Today's show is brought to you by Factor. And if you are ready to optimize your nutrition this year, try out Factor's chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in 2 minutes, so you can fuel right and feel great no matter what life throws at you. So what happens is I've got Factor a lot over the last, I think, going back to COVID was the first time I had it. It arrives at your house fresh, fully prepared, and refrigerated, which makes it just super convenient. All you need to do is wait 2 minutes while it heats up, and then you are eating fresh and a well-rounded meal quickly. Like I said, I've done Factor to different degrees over the years. They have options where you're getting delivered enough so that you're having dinner every single night, or it can just be supplemental, a couple of meals per week to give you a few nights off from cooking. What I've noticed most with Factor when I have it is it drives down the frequency with which I'm ordering, food in. And when I'm doing that, I'm eating healthier and I'm saving money. It's quicker, cheaper, and healthier than what I know I would be ordering. So eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code factorpodcast to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code factorpodcast at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Today's show is also brought to you by Skims. Skims obviously has been big in the women's clothing space for a while, but they have really expanded their product to the men's side of things, specifically men's underwear. And they sent me a bunch of them. Well, my favorite thing about Skims is that it's the type of boxer brief that both works for going to the gym, but is also just comfortable for everyday life. I have a bunch of the stretch 5-inch boxer briefs, and I would say they kind of like remind me of like when I would wear compression shorts when I was playing basketball, but they're not like overly tight. They're not restrictive in that way. It's just comfortable for working out, but also comfortable for running or or just comfortable when you're sitting at home. The 5-inch stretch boxer briefs, those are my personal favorite, but they're cotton boxer briefs, all sorts of different things there. And I think you should try and see if a pair works for you. You can shop Skims men's at skims.com and Skims stores. Let them know that we sent you. After you place your order, select podcast in the survey and select our show in the drop down menu that follows. Skims is the official underwear partner of the NBA, WNBA, and USA basketball. Jace, I know we were talking about Mike Conley a little bit in the Gobert section there in the starting lineup. I had honestly, man, I got to the point where I'd started to lose faith. I really had, and I think the last straw for me was that the defense just really felt like it was falling apart, kind of over the last month. And Britt wrote a whole column on it, and he had good points about one, just how good Mike's shooting has been, and you forget that sometimes. And also that to the defense part specifically, Rudy's presence out there with him helps cover up some of those, all right, there's a 6'8" guy that Mike's guarding under the basket that's backing down. Rudy, that's what Rudy's elite at, right? Is having that awareness of where the rest of the defense needs my help. And Britt was right. That's going to cover up a lot of the Conley stuff. He's played really well these last 3 games that he's played in. And, I just need to kind of reopen my eyes to the possibility that Mike is maybe part of the solution of this, of piecing it back together. Cause and I think for many of us, it had gotten to the point where it's all right, we need to really recalibrate expectations of what Mike can be. But then you see last night or in a couple of these games and you go, man, when Mike's rolling like that, it's when it feels the most like last season. Right. And how he kind of unlocks that gear. I saw you tweeting about him earlier. Just where you at with Mike?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely at this point in his career, and this was not true 5 years ago. Mike, for his size, was a very good defender. And I'm not saying he's a bad one now, but he's definitely much more of a team defender. And with the Wolves lineups, without Gobert, even without Julius, they were playing really small. It was just a lot of 5 out, teams would play 5 out. The Wolves would play 5 out offensively. Teams would play 5, put them 5 out. And it would just be, okay, there's no rim protection either way. So now Mike's supposed to play isolation basketball on either end. That's just not his game at all. And so it looked a little rough. And defensively, it's okay, I have to stay in front of my man. And is there a low man here? I don't know. Right. And then now we're switching things, and I'm switched onto this matchup. I've got no chance. And so, yeah, there will be teams, like you mentioned the matchup thing. There might be teams who can put them in those tight binds in the playoffs and whatnot, where it might be this is not a Mike series or whatever. This is not a Mike matchup, or he has to play only against these certain lineups that this team rolls out, whatever. But yeah, just in general, he's playing really well again. It's, I mean, I tweeted this number out since January 17th, if setting it at 90, which is 4.5 3-point attempts per game for him, he's leading the NBA in 3-point shooting. The best.
What was it? 48%, 47%?
47.7%. Yep. On 4.5 3-point attempts a game. So not nothing volume wise, cat volume from past Timberwolves seasons. It's true. Knocking down a bunch of shots. And while also back to that 5.5 assists to turnovers, which in that time is 4th in the NBA. He looks a lot like Mike, and maybe he's lost a half step defensively. And like I said, there will be matchups where that will hurt you more than others. But just in terms of there's a reason why, if you take anybody who's actually played the games, Dante's only played 7. But in that time, Mike has the best offensive rating on the team. He's just he can help create the offense. He can help finish the offense with the shooting right now. And he just is going to help you get into the right actions. There was a time, I don't remember which game it was, last week or something, where Ant came down and chucked up 2 isolation threes where I don't think there was a pass on either attempt. And it was this isn't great. And Mike just went and got the ball the next possession, ran a pick and roll, and I think got a layup out of it. It's okay, we need to do something. And it's just still a stabilizer of the offense, where when things do get a little wonky, he can do that. And also just be a nice ancillary piece right now too, with the way he's playing. So yeah, he's playing he's playing really well, just kind of across the board. And I do understand people's defensive concerns. I do think those will rear their heads in certain situations, but I do think Rudy does help atone for a lot of those things because he can still be an eraser where you're going to beat Mike by bullying him, basically. And Rudy, if he can just be that weak side guy, does help a lot with that.
Again, me and Britt were kind of talking about Conley versus DiVincenzo and what that brings, and I was kind of on the side of defending what DiVincenzo brings from a spacing standpoint, given that the volume is double what Mike's is. Okay, the volume alone is going to add value to the spacing. The distance with which DiVincenzo shoots is obviously going to lead to the spacing on the floor there. We know those things. I was doing that side of the argument, so I was kind of like doing the like pushing Mike down part of it, and I just referred to Mike as he's just a really good catch and shoot guy, and that also isn't totally true. Mike can get to his threes off the dribble, and a lot of the time it is in pick and roll game with Rudy. If Rudy pins the guy, Mike can kind of take that sidestep 1-2 dribbles right or left and shoot threes too. He isn't just chilling in the corner hitting 48%. He's doing the more. There's more value behind his 48% because there's situational catch and shoots. There's situational off the dribbles. You look and Julius was finding him for a bunch of those spray out threes that we're talking about after the double game. Well, watch Mike, what he's doing to position himself in a spot to be available for that Julius kick out. So he's open there. And that's, it's just the truth of the Mike thing is the biggest thing he brings is smarts. And so long as there's some juice in the tank, you're going to get value out of that because he's going to put himself in a situation to maximize himself, and the team. And sometimes it hasn't been maximized. Sometimes it's been really rough over the course of this year. But as his team plays better, as it has more ball movement, as it makes more sense, I think Mike Conley makes more sense in the process of all of it. And I was waiting so long for that this season that I kind of gave up on it. But that was always my theory of like, stick with Conley. Let's, don't chop up the minutes half and half between Conley and Dillingham. If it comes around, Conley will fit. If it comes around, Conley will fit. Now, we did have to wait till the 60-game mark for that to start happening. And I understand, again, it's only happening against poor teams. But I undersold Mike's shooting.
That.
Yeah.
You keep saying the 60-game mark. It's like the last 20 games he's done that. So it started at the 40-game mark.
Okay. I guess I'm thinking more so of last night and how he was positioning himself. I'm thinking of, you're right. He was shooting well going back 20 games. I think he can have been shooting well then without
with the great
overall
assist,
playing
with the
really
great assist to turnover numbers.
Well, maybe I'm wrong then. Maybe I'm wrong then.
And in that 20 games stretch, he has the team's best offensive rate. Like, okay, so I think you are wrong. The stats say I think that you are wrong, that it was not just like, oh, last night finally Mike's playing well. I think the stats pretty clearly show that that's true.
And so probably what it is then, if I'm wrong there, it's getting bogged down into my priors of what the first 40 games were. Yeah, and I wasn't willing to see, okay, those first games 41 through 48. Okay, it's getting better. No, I still was thinking about that, and it took me to the 60-game mark to acknowledge it. But you're right; those are the numbers.
I think it's fair to not say that in game 41 of like shot well last night. Okay, fixed it. Okay, so it took 40. So I understand the saying it took 60 for you to believe it. That makes sense. But I just wanted to point that out. That halfway through the season, he started playing better. And now it's like, now you see the sample of the 20 games. And I also don't want this to turn into like a Mike or Dante thing, because if I got in a playoff series, I would play Dante DiVincenzo like 38 minutes. And I know with the Wolves, they have so many good players, it's hard to get to that. But like, I just feel like
those 20 minutes that Clark and Shannon will be gone in the playoffs.
Sure. Right. Right.
As all teams do. Yeah.
It's still hard to get to 38, but I agree. I just think he is like the X factor of like, freeze it, makes it so it's really hard to pay too much attention to anybody, and the things that can really bog down the Wolves, like the things that Dante can do, and like you mentioned, the actual range where he is literally almost standing out of bounds as he spots up, and now it becomes so hard to load up on Ant, Julius, whatever, when you have a guy who's like, if you are even close to the nail, you are not within 12 feet of him. So yeah, I think having him on the court, especially as like the defense is compact and everything, I think that's going to be critical for them. Maybe you could definitely certainly find some times where Mike and Dante are playing alongside each other.
I was just going to say, I want to see that. That happened last night. And I feel like that is just like fit wise of two players on this team. We don't see
and they love playing with each other.
I know. That's what I'm saying. And so maybe for the playoffs, when you do ratchet Dante's up and you find a rotation accordingly, yeah, I would want to play DiVincenzo and Conley together as much as you can get to, because I think that's a great fit.
Yeah. And it is going to be, I agree with you, Kyle, all that stuff of like, this is still a complicated thing of how do these guys fit together in terms of minutes, lineups, all of these things. Because even when they're playing well now, it's going to be like, you're still making choices of, is this guy going to play 24 when you could easily play him 32 or whatever? And how do you make it all match? Do you lean heavily into some guys and really kind of mitigate the minutes of others when the matchup suggests that? I don't know. And I think Finch has kind of earned the chance to try, just in the sense of, 2 months ago, it was like, why don't you just play Rob? This team sucks. We'll just develop it, and it's not going anywhere anyway. And now since January 8th or whatever, it's like, I flipped the two, but they're 7th best offense or defense. They're 5th best of the other one, and they're 6th in net rating. And it is like, I almost feel like maybe some people are figuring out maybe the stench of the Cat trade is kind of wafted away, the instant reaction that everybody had. And people are going, wait, maybe Minnesota's not bad. I think I heard it on the Simmons-Russillo podcast from last night of like, they finally threw them in as like, and that's a dark horse team where, a month ago, Simmons was like, that team, all-time bad vibes, and I'm not saying it's wrong, but that is, you see now, it's like, wait, actually, there's something here. And I think even everybody's kind of seeing it of like, oh, that team actually probably is dangerous.
This team was always going to be good if it didn't have bad vibes. It did have bad vibes.
Yeah.
And it didn't make sense. We were watching, doing it every day, and you're like, yeah. And it was the case, like you said, that this team stinks and play Rob. That was not an outlandish thought in around Christmas or whatever with this team. It wasn't. But to their credit, that's Finch, the players, whatever it might be, the vibes, the chemistry, and the continuity is coming together. And so it is a different team. This team should be thought of very differently on March 10th than it should have on Christmas Eve. That's just, they've shown that they are not the same team. They've learned how to play different ways. Things have make a little bit more sense than they did before. I don't know. Like I was listening to Simmons and Russillo. I think there was only like 6 or 7 teams in that group. That's high praise.
Yeah, right.
That's high praise. I don't think I'm totally there yet. I want to see more of these things, but they have a case to be, as they said, a dark horse team, because it makes more sense now.
Yeah. And you just look at the teams across the board in the West, and it's just, I think you would give them a better chance to win the West than Memphis, correct?
To win it? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
I'm not saying to win a series. Maybe you take Memphis because you'd be like, well, they'll have home court and theirs. I just think to win it, like if all the pieces came together, that's kind of what, like,
yeah. If you're saying to win it all, like to get to the championship, to get to the finals, yeah, because then I need to see a level of upside that I don't see in Memphis. Do I think Memphis is more likely to go to the conference finals than the Wolves?
Sure.
Just because that's a little bit of a different bar, maybe. They're in that group. The Wolves are in that group, and the standings do not suggest that they are. That we're putting them in the top 7 in the league, and they're 7th in the West in terms of,
but Golden State's also in that top 7, and they have like the exact same record as Minnesota.
That's true. But that's the same thing too, is they figured out their shitty vibes as well, and are figuring out a style of play that works and changes. And let's not pretend that there isn't a precedent for teams kind of switching at the 50 game mark and finding a different identity and one that makes more sense, like Dallas last year. That, and I know that was a trade deadline acquisition, so maybe you can point to Golden State more so there. But I think some of what the Wolves shift feels to me like a team that made a trade at the deadline, and now the pieces make a little bit more sense, as trades sometimes do.
Yeah, and it just is like, it's tough to not forget that they did make a trade like the day before training camp. Like we heard Chris Finch last night say, well, we actually changed our spacing around Julius, and I haven't like dived in on what exactly that means, but he's like, we watched him play, we talked to him, and we're like, okay, how do we resituate where a guy's standing, who are we putting where? And now things are much easier for Julius. And it's one of those things where you think you know somebody, you think you know how they play, but then you actually watch them and your mind starts to turn, and it's like, well, we're ending up in this a lot. How do we get to here? And things just start to click. It is the whole it takes time thing can be frustrating for everybody, and I understand that. And none of this probably works half as well if Jaden doesn't have these times where he's thrust into more offensive roles of like, you need to do more. And then he's just like, oh, okay, that means not standing in the corner and taking threes, even when that's kind of what's presented. It means attacking more off the bounce, being more aggressive. And now I think the Wolves, like, they're running more plays where he's coming off of a dribble handoff with like a staggered screen with the intent of him attacking the bucket, you know, and that stuff wasn't existing before either. So that's the things where like the injuries were like, okay, we need to find ways to get Jaden in these spots.
The injuries were the trade.
Yeah, I agree in that it was a reminder for players and coaches of this is the type of player I am. And coaches going, oh, that's the type of player he needs to be. That kind of stuff. Like switches flipped. And it just so happened perfectly for them where guys taking on roles, they were doing more, but they were doing things that they could still do when people came back. And I think we saw that with Jaden. It was like, there's no reason why he can't keep doing these things, no matter who's back. Just maybe on a couple less touches. And that's what we've seen so far.
Yeah, I think it's possible that Finch wasn't doing a good job at the beginning of the season and is doing a really good job now. Like those things can both be true.
Yep. And right? I think a part of that is that you don't, like, you'd say players don't know what they have. We don't know exactly what they have. And coaches, I don't think necessarily. I think he would go basically last night. He's like, we changed some things. And that
do we know this? Do we know that Jaden could do this 4 months ago? No.
You know,
Did we know that Julius could play this way? No, because they kind of made a misstep of trying to make him a score there. And then at the beginning of the season,
Finch has admitted, like, we told him we told him that, like, we said we need you to score more. It's like, in my mind, when he said it, it was like, okay, so that's what
I remember
that was wrong. Like,
you remember in Sacramento, second game of the season, it was it was like, no, Julius, like, we need to fit around you, sort of thing. And that was the wrong move. But it was the second game of the season, and you just lost Cat, and you'd been kind of watching that team play against the Lakers and really be missing that second lever of just individual scoring that Cat provided all the time last year outside of Ant. And you're like, I kind of think we need that. I think that was the wrong move because Julius is not the individual scorer that Cat is. But they've now kind of purposed it, and it appears right now to be in a better place there. And a lot of the other random variables, like Mike not coming in healthy, the Jaden piece of it, Dante playing poorly at the beginning, it was just like all the pieces on this team were not what they are on October 22nd. They just weren't, and they've needed to figure it out. And I think it's a fair critique to say it took too long. I think if anybody's going to say that and it took too long, all right, I don't have a strong argument against that, but it's making more sense now. And I think that's a credit to the group staying together and Finch sticking to his guns while that was extremely unpopular in the public opinion, including mine. Got anything else you want to from that one? You want to wrap it up?
Nope.
All right. I always let's do Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Jason and I try and pick a couple every Monday. I was just looking at OKC Denver round 2. This is a really basic one, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander more or less than 33.5 points, assuming no Aaron Gordon in that game, and I think they're gonna have limited ways to be able to slow Shai, and I think he has 35 plus points again in this game. Jokic's number is really high for points plus rebounds plus assists. Even for him, it's 50.5. Got a little banged up yesterday. I mean, he's incredible. So I could be wrong about this, but I said less than that. And if I'm making a MVP lineup right here, Shai more than 33.5, Jokic less than 50.5 points plus rebounds plus assists. Did you have any?
Yeah, I did Luka over 30.5 points against Brooklyn.
Okay.
he'll turn into more of a playmaker mode, but I'm just interested in this like LeBron thing.
It was Luka points plus rebounds plus assists.
No,
Is that what
points,
it is?
just points over 30.5. I was like, maybe he'll go more. Maybe it would make sense to do all three, frankly, the points, rebounds, assist number. But I just got to the points when it was like,
Nope.
and then D'Angelo Russell over 16.5 points in that same game. Just
He's got his Lakers jersey on.
former team shoot the ball. I know, yeah, he'll feel right at home, with the boys out there.
Oh yeah, no, he's gonna be gunning.
Yeah.
I like D'Lo to have more than 16.5 in, and I wonder what his like 3 points. He's gonna shoot him
3.5 with the demon.
Yeah, with the demon there. Yeah, boost.
Yeah.
Okay, I like those. So that's just a normal slate for the Monday games. I think these are the most fun to do. If you know you're gonna be watching Thunder Nuggets tonight, it's fun to have a little something else going on the game as well. Just play for $5. Doesn't need to be more or less than that, Plus, it's what have you all four of those that 10-1 on that? Like, I don't know if that's $5, you win 50 if that happens. Like it's a low risk. You're not going to win it every time, but $50. It feels good to win $50, and that's what this is. It's for fun. It's daily fantasy. It's PrizePicks.com or the PrizePicks app. Always be looking. They have a lot of different promotions going on. I'm sure they'll have a ton for March Madness. So take a look at that. And if you don't have an account, sign up using the promo code Dane. That'll get you $50 in your account when you make your first $5 lineup.
What is Luka's points, rebounds, assists? You're off the screen. That's fine.
No, I still got the screen up here. Points plus rebounds plus assists, 49.5. Yeah, this is so many.
That's like you'd have to get the triple double on top of the points.
But dude, he gets whenever I watch him, he has 14 rebounds. It's crazy.
Yeah, I'd do that one. It's more fun.
Yeah, I like having those where it's like you can just tell when your guy's not going to get to the points. You're like, well, I don't know. Maybe he'll get 9 rebounds here in the second half.
Yeah.
Like that.
And it's best to watch basketball and not be mad if your guy made the right play. Like if they throw an alley-oop, it's like, shoot it, because that's what makes you feel like a loser.
That is
like when you're like, why didn't you just shoot that double covered shot?
Yeah. I needed it. All right, man. This was fun. Chris and I are going to do another episode tomorrow. We're going to kind of look at some of the schedule the rest of the way. We'll find I'll play a couple more maybe clips in that episode because I thought it was my first time around the team in a while. So we'll get some more of that going. That'll be Tuesday morning with Chris. And then I'm going to Denver for that game, and Britt and I will record a pod on Thursday after the Denver game. So that's what's coming up. You guys can follow Jace on Twitter at Jace Frederick. You can read him at the Pioneer Press, and we'll talk again on the pod in a week, man. Thanks for doing it.
Always fun, man.
All right, yep. Until Tuesday with Chris. He's Jace. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, yeah. Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, yeah. Don't let standards ever bring you down, yeah.